Okay, students, in this screencast, I want to show you how to complete the graphs for the Weather Watch. The first graph that I'm going to ask you to create is the temperature graph. And so what I want to do is I want to select column A, holding down Control, select column B, C, and D. So the temperature, the high temperature, and the low temperature. Now I'm going to come up to the Insert ribbon, choose the Scatter. Sometimes this first one up here with lines on it gets a little glitchy, so I'm going to suggest you use the straight line with the data points on it. So this chart type here, I click that, instantly the graph is made, but it's tremendously small and very difficult to read. So I'm going to come over here and right click on the field of the graph and ask the computer to move the chart to a new sheet. Right away, I'm going to label this as the temperature graph. That way I can find it more easily. Click OK, and now the graph is much easier to read. I want to adjust the layout, so I'm going to come up here to the chart layouts and choose layout 1. This allows me to give a title and the axes to be titled. Right away, as I look at this graph, I see I have a terrible error here. There's no way that the temperature at noon would fall outside the lowest temperature for the day. So I can hover over this data point and see that it was on 1010. Come back over here to my data sheet, find 1010, and I typed in 26. What I know happened this day is it actually was 62 degrees. As soon as I hit enter, I come back over here to my graph, and the graph is automatically corrected. Now, with the title, I need to title the graph. In this case, it is the 2017 Weather Watch at noon. So I'm going to ask you to include the time of when you did your observations. I'm also going to ask you to put your name up at the top of the page. And then we want to title the y-axis, in this case, and that was recorded in degrees Fahrenheit, and the x-axis is the date. Now, you may want to adjust a few things. One of the things, since we'll be reading this graph later, I'm going to right-click over here on the axis, and sometimes you have to be really careful about exactly where you click, but I'm going to add some grid lines. That way I can read the numbers more easily. I'm also going to come over here and add some grid lines for the date. Now it looks a little more like a traditional graph. One of the other things I might suggest you do is you can come over here to the design and layout. You may want to choose different designs or layouts. If you like a different color background, that's very easy to do. The one thing I will caution you is beware of choosing some of these selections where it's difficult to tell the difference between your data sets. So one where you use different colors is very helpful. Now, it is possible to choose your own colors, and I'm sure some of you can figure out how to change the color of your data points and your lines. One of the other things that you might also want to do is if you format the axis for the dates, one of the choices you have is adjusting the alignment. And the text direction here shows to be horizontal. If I change the text to rotating it 270 degrees vertical, now I can see that and read the dates a little more easily. I may want to adjust my graph though so that it is actually smaller, and if I click on just the right spot here, here we go. Now I can make it smaller. My dates show up nicely on my chart. So again, I want your weather watch, the time up here, in this case was noon, your name, you should have your different temperature lines labeled, your axes labeled, and the dates clearly showing. So that's the first temperature graph. Now, the second graph I'm going to ask you to make is the temperature along with the date and the dew point. So again, I click on each column, holding down Control while I click the column. I'm going to come back here to my Insert ribbon. Once again, choose a scatter graph, choosing the straight lines with dots. I need to move this to a new sheet. In this case, I'm going to call it temp and dew point, and move that to the new sheet. Click OK. Again, choose a better layout. So this is the 2017 Weather Watch, and this is temp. I misspelled that. At noon, and your name. Now the axis over here is temperature, and the axis here is date. Again, I think it would be a really good idea if you added some grid lines. So I'm going to add some lines in here, click here, add some grid lines. Again, if you choose to rotate the dates under the format axis, you can come in here under the alignment tab, change it from horizontal to vertical, and that will allow you to have your dates much more easily read. So now I've got my temperature and dew point together on one graph. Again, name, title, each axis labeled, and correct data. Double check your data here. Make sure your temperature line never drops below the dew point. If your temperature line drops below the dew point, you know you've mistyped a number. Now I'm going to come back to my data sheet one final time to make the last graph. In this case, I want to do the barometric pressure graph. So select the date column, holding down Control. I'm going to come over to this column and select pressure. Now back up to the insert ribbon, choose a scatter graph, a straight line with data points, and oh my goodness, I clearly see right away that I have an error. I'm going to go ahead and move this chart to a new sheet so I can see what's going on. I have pressure. Click OK. I have some bad data in here on 1010 again. Must have been tired when I was typing those numbers. I come up over to the sheet on 1010. Right here, 118. I'm quite confident that the pressure was 1,018 because there's never been a pressure that low for a weather station in Greensboro. So again, if I hit 1,018, come back here to my pressure graph, it looks much more reasonable. Again, I'm going to come over here to my Design and Layout tab, choose the Layout 1 so I can label my graph. Again, I want to have the label up here as 2017 Weather Watch, and this was at barometric pressure at noon. And put my name up at the top as well. Now I label the axis. This is barometric pressure in millibars. And dates down here. Again, let's format this axis, add some grid lines. I'm going to adjust the alignment to make the dates a little more easily read. If I slide this up, my dates all show up. I'm going to go ahead and add some minor grid lines in here and have a completed graph. You'll use these graphs to answer the questions. Again, double check each graph correctly has the year and weather watch, the time that you did your measurements, and each axis should be clearly labeled for all of your graphs. Each of the graphs, again, if you'd like to format it with a special background, you can even put pictures and things like that behind it. Make sure any extra graphics you put on are not confusing and cluttering up the graph too much. And you'll turn these all in to the class Dropbox.